Jayneen Sanders is the author of many of the books that I recommend to parents on how to have conversations with their kids about body safety, consent, feelings, and gender. As a teacher in the classroom and a mother of three, she noticed that there was limited early childhood education around preventing inappropriate touch. So she began writing and publishing books and resources for parents, caregivers, and teachers on how to talk with children about body safety and empower them to establish and maintain their bodily boundaries. When I reached out to Jayneen to ask her to be a guest on this video podcast, she was more than generous to give her time, and we covered a lot in a little bit more than 20 minutes. I asked her about what it was like to get her first book, Some Secrets Should Never Be Kept, what it was like to get that published, and the reception it received, where she sees the overlap in sex education and body safety, how she recommends approaching the topic of gender with young children, and the importance of parents to establish their own body boundaries with their kids. Jayneen is a talented woman who has gifted us parents with fabulous resources to spur conversations with our children. And stick around to the end of the interview where I ask her to give us her piece of parenting advice. And just a warning, there is a mention of how to prevent child sexual abuse and molestation towards the end of the interview. Jayneen, I am thrilled to be speaking with you. I am so happy that you are here because I love your books and so do my kids.
Oh, good. Hopefully they're very useful.
Yes, no, I do. I find them very useful because, I teach sex education for parents to help them have the modern day sex talks. And I recommend your books to all of my followers. And when I reached out to you about being interviewed, you were so kind and said you were happy to talk about all
Absolutely.
things. Yep. Happy to talk about all things body safety and consent, but sexuality wasn't your area of instruction. So I wanted to start off by asking you, when would you say the body safety talks begin to overlap the sex talks?
I would say around about 6 or 7, I would start to think about that. Or when the child starts to become very curious about the private parts and their function and what they do. And she or he has seen someone kissing or something like that. So, with my own, I have 3 daughters, but with my youngest daughter, she became very interested in this topic around about 6. Mm-hmm. So then I had that, I got a book and we talked about it and it was very practical and we spoke about it all. And then she was satisfied. The curiosity was okay. It was gone and she was fine.
Okay. Yeah. So would you say that because the entering of the sex talks would be more of like, where do babies come from? Or is it more about body safety, genitals, and protection?
Oh, no, I would start the body safety and consent talk from the moment the child is born, basically, certainly with consent. So from the moment you have that baby, you can say, you can tell them how you're interacting with their body, what you're doing, that you're moving their arm or you're moving their leg because you're going to, wash them or bathe them. So you'll be talking to them all the time about their body and what you need to do. And as they become verbal, then you give them a lot more choice about how they interact with you and how you interact with their body. So, can I move your arm? Is that okay? Can I put you into the seatbelt? And of course, and I know one question you're going to ask me is when they say no.
Yes,
and I have the perfect answer for that. Okay.
Fantastic.
So you always say to the child, I am your safety person. I'm the person that keeps you safe. And sometimes I have to hold your hand when we're crossing the road, or I have to do up your seatbelt because that keeps you safe. And as your safety person, that's my role. And we're going to have to do that right now. It's quite simple, really. Just letting them understand that you are their safety person, and it also helps later on as they're getting older when they want to talk to you about anything. You can say, you can talk to me about anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about, because I've made a few videos where I encourage parents to respect their child's bodily boundaries, but yet I receive loads of comments saying, you want me to ask my kid to touch them or to give them a kiss, and I say, yes, it's good practice and good understanding for establishing personal boundaries. But then they'll come back to me and say, well, if they say no, what do I do? And I was like, well, as an adult, right, there's some times where you want to say no to your child and they need to hear that as well. So how would you say to parents to help them establish their own body boundaries and demonstrate healthy boundaries to kids?
Yeah, one particular book that I wrote called Let's Talk About Body Boundaries, Consent and Respect. And that book came about because I had a book called No Means No, where a little girl could say, no, I don't want hugs or kisses, I'll give you a high five or whatever. But coming back the other way, I was doing a little bit of teaching, and I was finding that a lot of the boys actually were coming inside the girls' body boundaries, and they were a little bit frightened, a little bit scared, and they didn't know what to do. So those children had to learn to respect other people's body boundaries as well. And that includes adults. So, they can't just leap on you and hug you and kiss you without asking. It's as simple as asking, can I hug you? And you go, of course you can. And then, it's all on. The big hugs are there. But just like anybody else, sometimes adults don't always feel like they want that hug, or the child feels like they don't want that hug. And, again, one of my daughters is not a huggy person. So to this day, I have to say to her at 24, can I please have a hug as she's leaving? And she, of course, gives me a hug. But that consent has been there from the beginning. And I need to adhere to that just as much as she needs to adhere that I have boundaries, but I don't have too many boundaries. Like, please hug me.
Well, no, that's really good. I think as more parents are trying to implement these body safety, they take it to this extreme, or at least I kind of feel like they come back to me and are like, I can't believe you want me to ask this and this. And I'm like, there's always going to be a balance in it.
Yes.
But
And I think that query from parents comes from fear. Like, they want to do, in this era of parenting, there's so much information. Like, I'd go crazy if I were bringing up my kids now. Seriously, there is just so much information, and everybody is fearful they're going to, screw up their kids or do something wrong or not. They're really concerned. And I think it comes from fear. And it's pretty simple, really. It's just a matter of asking. And there are some shades of grey, particularly around children's safety. But if you do establish that lovely consent from an early age, you will have an empowered child, you will have an empowered teenager, and you will have an empowered adult who can say to their partner when they're sexually active, no, I don't like that. And no, you can't do that. Or, enthusiastically, yes, I would love that. But if you don't establish that from a young age, it really does put young people in danger, I think, because they don't know how to say no, and others will take advantage of that.
I think it's a great point of how it overlaps even from the very beginning. You think you're talking about consent in one way, but it is going to develop into the sex talks later on. So you not only make books about consent and body safety, because I love all of your books, but you also recognize feelings and gender. So many parents, I think, in the US and Australia are finding themselves having to talk about gender as it's in the news. It's quite a popular topic. So how do your books help parents to talk about gender with their kids, and which ones would you recommend?
Well, really, I come from the area of basically children are children. So I don't really care what gender they are or what they identify with. It doesn't really matter to me. But what I do care about is stereotyping and labeling. Labeling is what limits a child's potential, whether they identify as a boy or a girl. So whenever I talk about gender equality, people straight away think I'm talking about transgender or trying to change a child's gender. No, I'm not. I'm talking about equality for all genders, and not to stereotype and not to limit our children's potential. So I've written books. One is called No Difference Between Us. We have a boy and a girl, just establishing they do what they do, which is sometimes exactly the same. Another one is Who Am I am Me, which is a I never say what the gender of the child is. Never. It's a non-gendered child. Just saying, I like this, I like this, I like that. Who am I? Am I a girl? Am I a boy? I am me. So that's very simple. I really have one about princesses. Don't get me started about princesses. So I have one called Not So Perfect Princess and the Not So Dreadful Dragon, which is a fiction title, because I really want to say, this whole princess thing, it's really, it's quite dangerous in a way that, I know girls particularly love to be princesses, but when they are submissive, when they are not empowered, when they try to be small and delicate, this is not the kind of women we need in our world growing up. So I have that book. And then I have Pearl Fairweather, Pirate Captain, because I could not find a book about a pirate that was a woman. And so I wrote a book because there wasn't one. I was teaching again and I wanted to read a pirate story, and all the pirate stories were about boys. And I was like, okay, no, we need a pirate captain that's a woman. So I wrote that one as well. But I feel like gender stereotyping is a very slippery kind of fish. With body safety, you can say, these are your rules. It's quite black and white in a way. But gender equality is very tricky but we know gender inequality is the basis of family and domestic violence, where one gender feels they have power over another. So we need, particularly our girls, to take up space, to be just who they want to be. And I don't even think the word like tomboy is even relevant. It's just a girl being who she is. She's not a tomboy. She's just a girl doing the things she loves, playing the games she enjoys, and being herself. So I want all children, I don't really care what gender they are, to be themselves. And I also want to see that parents understand that softness can be a strength, that boys expressing their feelings and showing their gentle and soft side is such a strength, because they're going to be gentle and feeling beautiful dads and men who will work with women in an equal space. And, partner, if they partner in a heterosexual relationship, they will go forward together and not have this power imbalance.
I think that's one of the reasons why your books resonate, especially with my kids, so much, is because it is pushing back on gender stereotypes. And I talk about gender stereotypes, expressions, and roles way more with my kids who are in the primary and intermediate age than I think I ever heard until I got to university level, feminist women's studies courses about expression and stuff like that. So it's all about what you love to wear, what you love to play with. And you can have access to everything, but of course, whatever you enjoy playing with is what you enjoy playing with, right? Or what you enjoy wearing and things like that. So I think it's a really great way to introduce these concepts and these topics to children of a young age and then build upon it as they get older. But I think you're right. I think parents have to step back and observe more of what their kids like.
Exactly. But, as children, as young as 2, they will start to absorb stereotypes. It's on TV, it's in the cinema, it's in the shops. We've got the Target with all the pink kind of frilly dresses for the girls, and the boys are in these tops with dinosaurs on them and things like it's all around them. That you don't wear a shirt with a dinosaur on it. No, you really love dinosaurs because that's in the boys section. So parents need to be really aware that they try to break down those stereotypes and just let their children follow what they love without the labels. And if that means your son wants to go as Elsa to the school book day, that's what it means. And you'll be there with them, this is great. So, I definitely think there's a lot of work to be done there.
I'm on social media, you're on social media, and I'm sure you get parents that are not so great or not so happy with what we have to say. And they say, you know, how would you respond to the parents that say these types of books about gender and things like that put ideas into kids' heads? What would you say?
Okay. Well, certainly my books, how I write about gender, are putting ideas in their head to be who they should be, which is just follow their, their hopes and dreams and their interests. So that's fine. If a child is reading a book about a transgender child, they're just reading a book about transgender child.
Yeah.
Like, we know if a child is going to be trans across, it will be persistent, it will be consistent, it just won't go away. So really, when we read these books to kids about, children who are transgender or children who identify differently to them, it's just a story. It doesn't mean that your child is going to identify with that child. And if they do, and it's persistent and it's, constantly there and never goes away, then you need to look into that for sure. And they will want you to. And you need to listen to them. I mean, they give them the voice and listen to them. But no, we have stories about all sorts of things for kids. We have stories about dinosaurs and elephants and fairies. Does that mean every girl wants to be a fairy? Like, is she going to grow up and say, I want to be a fairy? Like, I hope not. But so kids, we need to understand that kids are smarter than what we think. And just because they're reading a story about a child who is transgender does not mean that's going to be their path in life.
Yeah, I always push back. I always say giving them information and education and reading to them about the variety of people that there are in the world is not going to change their gender identity. They will still tell you who they are and they will express themselves the way they want to be. You're just giving them the knowledge that if they meet somebody, they know what that is, or they know how to address them or talk to them. Yeah, so
that's exactly right.
We're on the same page.
We live in a colorful, diverse society. Let's embrace difference. Like, let's embrace that. Let's not be fearful of it. And what a better world it will be when we have empathy and compassion and kindness to everybody who comes from whatever space. Like I often see on social media, there is a lovely guy. He's a trans dad, and the flack that poor man gets because he birthed his daughter, it's just incredible. And it's crazy, like, just to have more empathy and compassion and kindness for everyone in this world.
Absolutely. I think that's what we're trying to do.
We are trying to do that. And we're starting, like, you're starting with kids, I'm starting with little kids are my kind of jam down lower. So I think we can change for the next generation. And parents, there is a wonderful generation of parents coming on board, like, seriously, not as conservative as in my day. And a lot of the pushback may actually be coming more from grandparents, but I have great faith in this generation of parents that they are far more open to ideas and suggestions, but they're just scared a little bit because there's so much information. But they've got it. They're doing it well.
It's been a process with my own parents and my in-laws, but it's been good. For the most part, they see the benefits. And I remember the first time my at the time 3-year-old said no, they didn't want to kiss my dad, their grandfather, and he was so taken aback and he was so sad that when she did say, I want to give you a cuddle, can I give you a cuddle? He was thrilled. He said it was the best hug ever because she wanted to do it. And I said, that's exactly what we're trying to do. And he got it, right? It took that moment of internalizing, but then it was good. But yeah, I do think you're right. I think every generation thinks, oh my God, what is this younger generation doing? What is going to happen? It's, so sad for the future. But then, you know what? Everything works out. It hasn't come to an end. It all works out. So, yeah. Now, I cannot have you on here and not address and I not address child sexual abuse and molestation, because your first book that you published through Educate to Empower was Some Secrets Should Never Be Kept. And I would love to just know, what was your motivation for writing that book, and how was it initially received at the time?
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Well, that was my first book, and I'm not a survivor of sexual abuse. But when I was a young woman, I was a teacher, but I was also in publishing as an educational editor. And I edited a book called Keeping Children Safe by Dr. Frida Briggs. So this was a long time ago, like this was really about 40 years ago. And I thought, wow, this is such a great book. If ever I have kids, I'm going to teach them this kind of body safety information, and that they can say no, and that their body's their body, and they have a body boundary, blah, blah, blah. So I did. 3 daughters, we did that with them. And I just thought everybody else would do that as well. So when I was on the parent committee at my children's school, I went there and I said, we should be teaching our kids. I called it at the time sexual abuse prevention education, but I've since now called it body safety, because that just shocked everyone. They just thought we were going to be talking about actual sexual abuse, which we're not. So body safety. And everyone just looked really weird and, strange, and put me to the bottom of the agenda. So I went home that night and I said to my husband, I'm going to use my writing skills to write a book where people will take notice. I'm sure there is a way to write this into a story that gets a message across that children shouldn't keep secrets, and how to keep them safe, So I wrote the book, Some Secrets Should Never Be Kept, and I set it in a sort of faraway land, and there's a brave little knight. So it's kind of a little bit of distance. So if there is a child who's reading that who has been sexually abused, there's that little bit of distance. And so I wrote the book, and then because I had been in publishing, I went to 3 publishers. They all said no. I went to some illustrators. They said no. So one illustrator, who's a lovely friend, Craig Smith, quite well known here, he said he would illustrate it, and he says that he's very proud of that book. So then we were like, okay, no one wants to publish this book. So my partner Mark and I said, okay, we'll take a loan out from the bank and we're going to publish this ourselves, because this book is just too important. And so that's how we started Educate to Empower, that very first book. And being a teacher at heart and a teacher, I decided to write some lesson plans with that as well, so that they could, parents and teachers could implement the book, have a beginning, an introduction, and then read the book, and then some reinforcement activities. And so that was probably about 12 years ago. And my goodness, it was really tough. It was really tough to get that book out there. And in fact, I took it to one kindergarten, and she told me, get out of here with that book. Get out of here.
Oh my gosh.
And nobody was talking about body safety or consent in those 12, 13 years ago. But I just kept pushing and pushing with that book. And then, some government organizations used it with social workers, and then it was translated, and then it's gone on from there.
It has.
And so it's gone on from there, and it is I wrote that book so it would be timeless, so that it would never date, that the story would be really relevant. And for a child who's never been abused, it's just another story. It's just a story about a little boy who gets really frightened and finally decides to tell his secret to his mom, and all is well. But for a child who has been abused, you will probably get a disclosure from that book, which we have. So I'm very proud of that book.
It's such a great book.
It here.
Yeah, it is. It's such a great book, and I will link it in the description here for people who don't have it. I think it's one of the books that you should be in your children's library as you're setting it up when they're an infant for reading to them, because it is fabulous. Thank you for sharing that with us. And this interview is so quick. The 20-minute talks, I feel like it just goes so fast. But I have one last question, and it's pretty quick. But my audience is mostly parents, and parents who are currently in the thick of it. What would your number one piece of parenting advice be to them as someone who has been there and done that? What would your piece of advice be?
I think be gentle on yourself is really tough, and you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. But just always be kind and compassionate to children, and get down and listen to them. Like, even though you're busy and everything is going crazy and, there's cooking and stuff, if they need you, just take a breath, stop and listen to them. Look them in the eye and listen. And because they are the most important thing. Everything else around, the house will get tidy, the laundry will get done, but they need you right in that moment. And I think that is how you show love to them. And, even now with adult children, if there is a problem and they ring up and, I'm busy at work or whatever, I will stop and I will listen and I will take that time, because that's what you do when you love someone. You take that time. Yeah.
That's really powerful. As soon as you say, like, stop what you're doing, I immediately think of chucking my phone across the room and being like, I am not looking at that thing. I am looking at you, my child. You are the most important thing. Yeah.
That's exactly right. The phone.
Yeah. The phone. I fear the day that it's all just a chip in our head that is constantly on all the time. But the future will be fine. I keep telling myself it all comes full circle. Well, Jayneen, thank you so much for being here. I have links in the description to all of your books, to your website, Educate to Empower, that has fabulous resources and some of my favorite resources as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And if ever I can do anything to help, let me know. I'll be there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.